The Dark Ages were a rough time to be alive if you were unto king or an aristocrat. Life was hard, dangerous, and smelly, but like today, people still had to find ways to get busy. And sometimes that meant some pretty bad romantic misadventures. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to look at some Dark Ages romantic misadventures. Gotta like and subscribe. I sure hope so, because I have spent all day working on this video for you. And it would really mean a lot to me if you showed your support. First up, we have to talk about how difficult it was to meet someone in the Dark Ages. No online dating or Tinder, no bars or clubs, and no cute meet cutes at the local coffee shop. So where did medieval men and women go to find love? They went to church. It was uncommon for young men and women to be set up on blind dates by their parents with other families they had made an alliance with. If the two people hit it off, then they could get married right away. Sometimes these blind dates would go horribly wrong, like in the case of Rinaldo at Armida. Rinaldo was a knight from northern Italy who became enamored with a beautiful woman named Armida after hearing about her from his friend. However, when he went to meet her, he found out that she was a man dressed as a woman. What had happened was that Armida was actually a Moorish queen who had been captured by Christian forces and taken to a monastery. She managed to escape, but in doing so, she cut off her own balls, because she didn't want to be taken captive again. When Rinaldo realized that Armida was not the woman he had thought he had fallen in love with, he was so disgusted that he left her and went to live in a cave as a hermit. In the Italian version of the story, Rinaldo was actually gay, and he was so overcome with desire for Armida that he ended up killing her. Now that is one way to start off your marriage. The Dark Ages were also a time of superstition and magic, so it's not surprising that some people believed that they could control the weather, and that belief often led to disaster. Take, for example, the case of George Stacy and Margaret Cleave. Both were accused of being witches and were put on trial in 1612 in England. They were said to have caused a hailstorm to destroy the crops of a local farmer by cursing him. The problem with stories like this is that there is no real way to prove that they didn't just have bad luck. Hailstorms can happen at random, and sometimes they can destroy crops. It's possible that the farmer just had bad luck and that Stacy and Clitheroe were innocent. But they were both put to death anyway. Speaking of witches, it wasn't only the weather that people thought they could control. There were many people in the Dark Ages who believed that they could control the minds of others. This was especially true of women, who were often accused of being witches and using their powers to seduce men. One of the most famous cases of this type of accusation was that of Isabella of France. Isabella was the wife of Edward II of England, but she was unhappy in the marriage because Edward was more interested in his male lovers than he was in her. In 1325, Isabella began an affair with her husband's favorite, Piers Gaveston, and soon she was accused of using her powers to control him. This was not helped by the fact that Isabella and Gaveston were seen together in public quite often, which led to rumors that the two were having an affair. Eventually, Edward had enough of Isabella's behavior and he kicked her out of the royal court. Isabella fled to Paris, and there she met up with Roger de Hoofden, a chronicler who wrote down the story of what she told him. In his account, Isabella said that she had never had an affair with Gaston, and that she had only been seen with him because he had been following her around, trying to spy on her for Edward. However, this was not the end of Isabella's story. After spending time in Paris, she returned to England and took over as regent while Edward was on campaign in Scotland. While she was regent, she tried to assert her power by raising taxes. But the English nobles hated this, and they forced her to flee once again. She spent her final years in exile in France. Not all love stories from the Dark Ages are sad ones. Sometimes they just end up being really weird. Take, for example, the relationship between King Henry VIII of England and his wife, Catherine of Aragon. Henry had wanted to divorce Catherine for years because she had not given him a male. However, the Pope would not grant him a divorce. So instead, Henry broke with the Catholic Church and started his own church with himself as its head. He then married Anne Boleyn, who would eventually give him the son he so desperately wanted. After Anne's execution, Henry would marry Catherine Howard, who was known for her promiscuity even before her marriage to the king. Catherine had a number of affairs during her marriage to Henry, and she even got pregnant by one of her lovers. When Henry found out about his wife's infidelity, he was furious. He had her put on trial for treason, and she confessed everything. She was executed, and Henry married his second cousin, Catherine Parr. And speaking of Henry VIII, let us talk about one of the most famous love stories from the Dark Ages. How did Henry VIII meet Anne Boleyn? Boy meets girl. Boy loses head. Well, maybe not that last part, but you never know with Henry. Anyway, the story goes that Henry first saw Anne at a party in 1527, and he immediately became infatuated with her. He began following her around everywhere, and even went so far as to hire her as a lady-in-waiting to his wife, Catherine of Aragon. Of course, this didn't work out because Henry was so obsessed with Anne that he could unkeep his eyes off her. Eventually, he decided that he wanted to marry her, and he broke with the Catholic Church in order to do so. As we mentioned earlier, after he had an executed for adultery, he married Catherine Howard, who was known for her promiscuity even before her marriage to the king. Catherine had a number of affairs during her marriage to Henry, and she even got pregnant by one of her lovers. When Henry found out about his wife's infidelity, he was furious. He had her put on trial for treason, and she confessed everything. She was executed, and Henry married his second cousin, Catherine Parr. As you can see, love in the Dark Ages was a wild ride, but hey, at least it was never boring. Who knows what kind of crazy romantic misadventures would take place today if we didn't have the internet. What is the craziest love story you have ever heard? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.